Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Reporters Roundtable, and welcome back to San Francisco. This is our first show in 2012, back in the San Francisco studio. We were at CES last week, of course. I was planning on starting Roundtable this year on Friday in our normal slot, but there's so much happening today that we had to do a show today on SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and PIPA. What does PIPA stand for? Protect IP Act? Yeah. Anyway, these are both two really important pieces of legislation that are heading to votes very shortly. And in protest of these bills, which I'm sure you've heard of, several rather major sites have gone dark. They've blacked themselves out to say we protest these bills, and we will be back online tomorrow. Until then, we're doing this to show you how important this stuff is to us. Now, to talk about what these protests mean, what effect they are having, what this means for the future of the Internet and the future of this legislation, we have two great guests, both joining us by Skype. First of all, our chief political correspondent for CNET News is Declan McCullagh. Declan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Reed.
And also joining us from the Electronic Frontier Foundation is activist Trevor Timm. Trevor, how many jobs can you have where you get paid to be an activist?
I mean, I might have one of the only ones, but
you are a lucky man. It must be fun and interesting.
Oh, especially now.
So it's a very exciting day. Today is January the, what is it?
18th.
The 18th, January 18th, the day Wikipedia went black, the day Craigslist went dark, the day Google censored its own logo. Gentlemen, Declan first, why are these sites doing this? What is behind these protests?
Well, this is what could be a historic moment in the history of Internet politics and maybe even American politics. This is pretty remarkable. The reason the sites are going dark and you're seeing all of Wikipedia go offline, if you're a student, hope you did your homework a day early, is to protest the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Act, which collectively would create kind of an Internet blacklist. This is a list of copyright holders and the Department of Justice would come up with. They'll get court orders, and then U.S. Internet service providers, Comcast, AT&T, whatever you use at home, you just couldn't get to these sites anymore. These would be primarily offshore sites that are accused of infringing piracy. And so there's some free speech problems with that, but we can go into those later. That's kind of the high-level view, and the protest has been planned for a few weeks, and it's actually having some impact already. You have 4 senators so far today who are sponsors of Protect IP say, oh yeah, okay, and no more, we're withdrawing our names.
Fascinating stuff. Trevor, from the EFF, first of all, was the EFF involved in organizing or being a part in any way of this joint protest?
Yeah, we've been working behind the scenes on this for a couple of weeks ever since we found out that it might happen. Reddit, of course, started it a few weeks ago, and then Wikipedia followed, which is great. They're the 6th largest U.S. site. They get 25 million hits a day. And you've seen it already with the congressmen and senators coming out against this bill today. I think the last count was 29 congressmen had said they would oppose the bill today. They were either for the bill before or hadn't made a decision. And I think that number is a couple hours old, and there's been a few more, one from Rhode Island and one from Maryland, since we've been on the air. So they're falling like dominoes.
So what's blacked out today, and when does this end? We talked about Wikipedia and Craigslist being two very big ones. Pop Earls, Reddit, huge site, social site, is down. Any other big sites that are, they're not down, excuse me, they're blacked. And in fact, on Wikipedia, it's very interesting because you'll see a flash of a page, and then you'll get this pop-up page in front saying, we're off for the day. Any other big sites that are blocked today?
Well, Wired is protesting. BuzzFeed is protesting. And EFF is showing solidarity by darkening our whole website. All in all, I think there's about 7,000 sites that are currently doing this. There is an easy widget you can get for your WordPress personal blog that can black it out very easily. And it's great because, a lot of the tech world have known about these bills and the dangers for a few months, but it's the ordinary Americans that we're really trying to target with this, because as you might have read, many of the network newscasts have been basically ignoring these bills, even though it's been the talk of the tech industry for a couple months. And finally, people, if there's 25 million people going to Wikipedia a day, there's going to be millions literally learn about this for the first time. And we're seeing the so-called network TV blackout kind of fade away tonight. Actually, our own Julie Samuels is going to be on ABC World News tonight. So, and then obviously we saw this morning on the front page of the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, USA Today, was all about the protests. So it's really captured the imagination of the public, I think.
Declan, any surprises, the effect of these blackouts, any surprises that these are having?
Well, let's see. It would have been pretty easy for Google.com and Amazon.com, Facebook.com, and so on to say, here's how to contact your member of Congress. We use geolocation to try to serve you ads. We know that you're in, say, Palo Alto or San Francisco or whatever, and it'll throw up ads that are relevant to you. And then you could have really overwhelmed the switchboard. You could have this could have been a really historic day when it comes to really pressuring Congress, putting the screws to members of Congress. But instead, they chose a milquetoast approach. It was Google's, let's just have a petition. You sign a petition. Like, if you're a member of Congress, why do you care about a petition? You care about calls to your office. And Amazon just had a link to a trade association. Facebook just had a blog post from Mark Zuckerberg. And so they could have done much more. Wikipedia did do more. But they didn't. It wasn't quite the nuclear option that I wrote about last month. Instead, it was just maybe the heavy artillery option. And so when I talked to members of Congress, because the switchboard was still up and running, they reported heavy volume, but some said, well, we've had worse when it's abortion or gun rights or something like that. We've had more calls, and I've heard numbers between 300 and 4,000 calls today to members of Congress or senators, and that's a piece. That's a lot, but it's not millions.
So there was enough of an effect. So the withdrawal of support by key members of Congress is a direct response to these blackouts today, is it not?
It is, but let's also put it in perspective. You had 41 sponsors of, say, the Senate Protect IP bill going into today. Now we have 41 minus 4. So in other words, it's had a 10% impact. 90% of the sponsors are still saying, we like it. And they might be saying we like it with reservations. They certainly know what's going on, but it's not like it's half of them dropped off or something like that.
So since these congressmen and women are now expressing reservations about this bill, will that cause the vote for this or for this legislation to be delayed in any way, or is it going to be redrafted and go to a vote on schedule?
Well, we don't know yet. It's a very fluid situation. Senator Harry Reid said on Meet the Press earlier this week that, we're going forward with the floor vote, which is scheduled for January 24th, the day after the Senate returns from its holiday recess. And in terms of the House, the SOPA bill, its author, Representative Lamar Smith, said yesterday, we're going ahead with the committee vote as scheduled next month. We're going to get this reported out and move to the House floor as soon as we can. The Republican leadership is having some second thoughts about how it's going to happen. It might derail things. It's just too early to say.
Trevor from the EFF, you guys are tracking all these sites that are protesting the PIPA and SOPA. When are these protests going to end, or is this going to pick up steam, and are we going to see tomorrow being what's tomorrow going to look like on the web when the 24-hour blackouts are supposed to end on the big sites?
Well, I mean, these are going to be continuous protests. Obviously, the sites won't be blacking out like they are today, but we plan on continuing this fight because, as Declan said, the Senate's voting next week. But I just want to push back on a little bit of what he was saying. It's been less than 24 hours since this main protest started, and we've seen huge numbers. Google has a petition, as Declan said, and it's gotten over 4 million signatures today, which is just an astronomical number for being up for 12, 16 hours now. EFF alone has sent over 750,000 unique emails to Congress today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not including the dozen other organizations who are mobilizing people. Having 29 or 30 congressmen switch their position in one day, I think is kind of a big deal. And
let's talk senators, though. Trevor, sorry to interrupt, but you got 4 senators to switch their positions out of 41. We're not talking about people who never really liked it in the first place. We're talking about actual sponsors listed on the bill's webpage.
One of the things one of the things I'm very curious about is, Declan, to go back to that point, you're talking about sponsors of this bill who, in light of this internet protest, which is not even as big as it could have been, have changed their positions. Kind of egg on their face for maybe not reading the bill they sponsored ahead of time, or what's going on with these folks?
I think so. Our colleague Eleanor Mills contacted all of the sponsors of SOPA in the House, and I contacted all of the sponsors of Protect IP, and that's why I have I think a reasonably good feel for where they stand, and how many are defecting. But think of it this way. I mean, if you're a member of Congress, you've been supporting all these MPAA, RA-backed bills for the last decade. It's really since the DMCA, since the No Electronic Theft Act, which made non-profit copyright infringing a federal felony. Hollywood has kind of got what they wanted. There's been this, with one exception, maybe the Senator Hollings bill that would implant copy protection technology. It's been a ratchet effect, a noose tightening, whatever metaphor you want to use. They're getting what they want out of Congress. And so if you want to cozy up to the MPA, or you think that maybe you are a Republican and you think property rights extend to intellectual property rights, you can. There's little cost a year ago in signing on to this kind of legislation, and you may have not really paid close attention to it, but now there's a price to be paid, and this is the real victory for the internet if it actually pans out. Now,
I want to talk about the loyal opposition to these protests. There are several sites. In addition, we mentioned WordPress is another one, who are very vocally opposing these bills. But there are some sites and some people who are taking either moderate positions or are supporting it, throwing the weight behind these bills, in fact, deriding these protests, in particular some media organizations. Trevor or Declan, do you want to talk about the opposition to these protests?
Trevor, I can do it if you...
Sure. No, I'll take it.
Okay.
Well, like I was saying before, all the content companies which own the major television networks have been against these bills for a long time. It's kind of turned into a internet community tech sector versus Hollywood, and the MPAA has come out and said today that these protests haven't really worked because they didn't get the big sites. But I think that's a little disingenuous. They're trying to just put a spin on it, given that Google has a petition on their front page, which they've never done before. Wikipedia with their 25 million users. So they're trying to spin this in a sense to make it seem like this is just a publicity stunt. But it's really getting people who have never heard about these bills before to act, and that's all we can ask for. I think the problem is that when people hear copyright, a certain segment of the population kind of tunes out. Because there's always copyright bills in Congress. I believe since about 1995, there's been 32 bills that have been passed through Congress that have strengthened copyright protections. And so, they didn't realize how this was going to affect ordinary internet users as just law-abiding citizens who don't infringe on copyright. So hopefully that's what we're getting out of this, that we're getting the people who normally wouldn't pay attention to the political process kind of jumping in and making their voice heard.
Declan, can you discuss the Wall Street Journal and also Rupert Murdoch's opposition to these protests as stunts?
Oh, no. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the quality of writing and argument on the Wall Street Journal editorial page, agree with it or not, and I probably do half the time. It's a reasonably well argued editorial today. I don't think they're just carrying water for the content industry. I think that they're falling into the trap that some conservatives do, and that is, we like property rights. This is a fundamental to a conservative or libertarian position, and so therefore intellectual property rights we have to defend with the same vigor. But there are some differences. We can talk about those in some detail, but that's why this is something that splits the conservative community. The Heritage Foundation has expressed concerns with the legislation. The libertarian groups like Tech Freedom, Cato, CEI have as well. But you have other groups, some other conservative groups, including Americans for Tax Reform and Concerned Women for America, and Lamar Smith, who represents a conservative district in Texas Hill Country. He's got a 0% rating from NARA, the abortion rights group. I mean, this is a conservative fellow, but he's supporting the legislation. One more point, and that is in terms of Rupert Murdoch and that his twittering. I think that was just kind of silly. I think he's new to Twitter and was taking some hot shots at Google and some of the other companies that don't exactly like this legislation.
Now, it's interesting. There are also voices in the middle, which I find very interesting. For example, Twitter. Dick Costolo, the CEO of Twitter, says, "Closing a global business in reaction to a single issue national politics is foolish." And that was on, where was it? On Inquisitor, I think. I found that an interesting quotation. I think that echoes some of the derision against the protests, where some people have been saying that shutting down Wikipedia or shutting down potentially Twitter or something like that is... I wouldn't call it a national security issue, but it's taking down services that people rely on for what other people see as grandstanding. Let's talk about the moderate position, the Costolo saying this is not the right way to protest this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think he even said that he was kind of taken out of context there. I think he was talking about just Twitter and not Wikipedia and these other sites in general. But, I can understand his position because, Twitter's fundamentally different service than Wikipedia. Wikipedia, you go for information, where Twitter's kind of a communications device. And I don't even know if shutting down Twitter would have been as effective as, millions of people tweeting about it today and amplifying the message. Wikipedia is different because people go there for other information. And, they wouldn't normally hear about SOPA on Wikipedia unless they specifically went there for that information. So I think, Twitter has done a lot. Their general counsel has been writing blog posts about this subject. They've come out strongly against it. They signed a letter with the other big companies. So I wouldn't necessarily fault them for that. But I also want to go back to what Declan was saying about this being a conservative issue, because I think it's a really good point. Out of the 29 Congress people who have switched or opposed the bill today, 26 have actually been Republican. And a lot of them are Tea Party leaders, like Marco Rubio from Florida or Jim DeMint from South Carolina. Even the longtime Judiciary Committee member Orrin Hatch from Utah came out against this bill today. And he had been a co-sponsor before. And it's actually strangely becoming more of a conservative issue or a Republican issue than a Democrat issue. You had Red State, the influential Tea Party blog, saying that they were basically going to primary any Republican who was going to support SOPA, even if it meant taking down somebody that they normally liked. And so I think that kind of caused a rift within the Republican Party, and it seems like they are coming out en masse against it today, at least for the members that are usually associated with the Tea Party.
Declan, do you think these bills have any chance now that their most loyal supporters are turning against them?
Well, not quite the most loyal supporters. I mean, you don't see, say, members of Congress representing Hollywood turning against this. But I will agree with Trevor on this point, and that is that this is becoming that all of the senators who I'll call it defected from that list of 41 today were Republicans, and this is becoming kind of a partisan issue. Generally, copyright isn't, but if you look at the numbers now, it's I just did a Google Plus post about this, and it's 24 Democratic sponsors in the Senate and 10 Republican sponsors. And that's a 1 to 2.5 ratio. I mean, this is starting to become a Democratic bill, and Republicans are, I think they're going to enjoy finding themselves in the loyal opposition. My colleague Seth, our colleague Seth, reminds me that Al Franken is a sponsor of Protect IP in the Senate, which might surprise some of his early supporters. I think Republicans would actually have a lot of fun, be able to raise money. They're the party of the internet now. The Democrats are the party of Hollywood. Where would you rather be? Where's the money? Where are the votes?
That's fascinating.
Yeah, they can pull this one off.
Now, as we go ahead, Trevor.
I was just going to say, Al Franken is one of the craziest cases out there. When he was talking about net neutrality, he called it the greatest free speech issue of our time. And he wrote an op-ed talking about how we simply shouldn't give corporations any control of the internet. And now here he is as a co-sponsor of PIPA, and he hasn't made any move toward taking that back. And, obviously these bills give corporations vast more power to censor foreign websites. So it's just amazing that he can say that less than a year ago and still not come out against this bill.
Now, I want to, as we begin to wrap up here, look at some of the extreme positions on these bills and try to find the truth between them. On the one hand, the MPAA sent out a release today in the middle of all this hullabaloo, saying the Protect IP Act narrowly defines an infringing website as one dedicated to infringement that has no significant use other than engaging, enabling, or facilitating infringement. And no provision of Protect IP will shut off access to any site that has any non-infringing use. All right, that's what the MPAA, the supporters of the bill, are saying. On the other hand, you have sites like PopPearls, which I mentioned earlier, which has gone dark today. This is a link site, a very useful, a great site. I use it. That says on its notification that the site is offline. This legislation, Protect IP, would put a site like this in trouble if it linked to a web page anywhere online that had any links to copyright infringement. Which of these is true and which of these is false?
Well, the MPA is extremely exaggerating on their claim that this only affects foreign websites and only sites that are, wholesale copyright infringement. That's just not true. They have taken out the most egregious provisions in SOPA, which would have given corporations carte blanche to take out any site in the U.S., even if it was just one video out of a million that were copyright infringed. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of provisions that still apply to American sites. For example, the immunity provision, which gives ISPs broad immunity to overblock users. So if the Justice Department is signaling that they get a court order and say block this site, if they block more than that site, they're immune from being sued over it. They can also block sites voluntarily and get immunity, which means corporations can essentially make a backroom deal with these ISPs, or if they own them, like Comcast and NBC, to shut off sites that they don't like that might be competition. And then there's the anti-circumvention provision, which says not only can you not these sites will be censored, but anything to get around the bill and its censorship mechanisms will be censored as well. So that's where people are going to have to start policing their own sites for links, and that's what Wikipedia is worried about. A simple list of IP addresses of these blocked domains may be considered under this anti-circumvention provision and be enjoined by the Attorney General. So to say that these don't affect American sites is pretty disingenuous.
And what about the extreme position that PopPearls, which is a site, as I said, that links to other useful sites, says that any time we put a link up to an infringing site, our whole site could be taken offline by Protect IP or SOPA? That's it.
That's probably an exaggeration. That might have been true. You could have read that into the bill in the original SOPA, but after the manager's amendment, they took out the parts that said a portion of the site can be taken down by a corporation with 5 days notice or cut off from payment processors. So, it's not just a link that's going to get your whole site shut down, but it could get pages censored, essentially. And the anti-circumvention provision, the language is really unclear. So would the prior restraint be for the page that is on, for the whole website? We're not really sure. So there's a lot of holes in this bill. Another part of it is the definition of foreign site. A lot of American sites have their own domain names in other countries, like google.ca or amazon.co.uk. So do those fall under foreign sites? And on the flip side, Pirate Bay is piratebay.org, which is a U.S. domain. So are now they domestic site? It's very confusing, and it's very clear, on the other hand, that these will definitely affect U.S. sites.
They will. Okay, Declan, what do you think is going to happen next? You've been following this for a while. You predicted back in December that there would be a blackout based on this. Tell us what you predict is going to happen next with these bills.
Oh boy, I was pretty right for once in predicting a few weeks ago that there'll be a blackout today. Though, if what I want to see happen, it's not quite a prediction. It's more like a hope. Is that there's a House vote scheduled well in advance, and that gives internet companies enough time to really do it right. I don't want to have some sort of sign some petition that nobody really cares. If you're a member of Congress, you might be a little threatened, but not as much as say, your primary challenger being funded. That really hurts. Another thing I want to see a concert on the Mall in Washington, D.C. I want to see Mr. A+K from Twitter himself being the MC. I want to see Senator Wyden giving the opening remarks, and the musicians who have taken to YouTube and Twitter to protest SOPA and Protect IP. I want to see them do the concert. You can have 100,000 people there pretty easily. It would just cost a few $1 million. That's nothing compared to the MPA's lobbying budget. If Google and company did that, it would be an amazing day.
All right, we'll see the million-page march coming to the mall near you. Trevor, any final words on... are we going to see more protests like this over this or similar issues in the future? More big sites taking themselves offline in forms of protest? What do you think?
Well, I think the sites this time took themselves offline because they thought that these bills actually threatened their existence. But, I don't think that, that's kind of the nuclear option, as Declan said. So I don't think that's going to be kind of a common occurrence. But it is great to see that the internet has been mobilized for this bill. Before this, there was never any great urgency to petition Congress for bills. And there are many bills coming up in the next few years that are going to affect the internet, like data retention, wiretapping, and CLIA. So, this is really good for online activism in general. And we're going to see this continue for SOPA too, because the Senate comes back next week. We got to remember, congressmen aren't even back in Washington yet. So a lot of their phone lines were closed today. So when Senate returns next week, again, we're going to ask people to call. And I think we're going to see a slow, steady stream of senators starting to, really, really change their position and hopefully kill this bill for good.
Trevor, thank you very much. That's Trevor Timm of the Electronic Freedom Frontier Foundation. Is it Frontier or Freedom?
Frontier.
Electronic Frontier Foundation. Thank you very much for making the time. Declan McCullagh is our senior political correspondent here at CNET. Thank you, Declan. You can find all of Declan's stuff on CNET News, news.com. It is really, really interesting. I encourage you all to read it. He's been covering this thing for months. It's fascinating coverage. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time. Thanks, everyone, for watching the special edition of Reporters Roundtable. I think we will be back on Friday with a new show, probably about Yahoo and everything that's going on over there. So stay tuned. Thanks, Stephen, for producing. We'll see you guys all on Friday. Take care.
Thanks, Rafe.
Thank you.